The day before it all unraveled, I was in the supply closet with a flashlight in my mouth, digging through a box of shredded policy binders from 2017 because someone claimed we didn't have documentation on our ITR compliance protocol. Jokes on them, I laminated it. Twice. That's the kind of woman I am. Not flashy, not political, not one of the ones who gives update presentations with pastel slides and buzzwords like synergy. I'm the one who quietly prevents our entire federal contract portfolio from imploding in flames because one idiot thought a due deform could be approximated. My team? 7 borderline obsessive humans who could spot a forged signature from across a room and once found a hidden data leak because the timestamp on an internal memo didn't match server logs by 42 seconds. We weren't loud. We weren't liked. But damn, we were essential. We called ourselves the quiet department. Compliance and risk, but make it unsexy. That's the point. If we were doing our jobs right, no one ever noticed us. Our job was to track 72 regulatory controls across 6 domains: cyber, export, financial, ethical, HR, and systems integrity. 72, that's not an exaggeration. 72 areas where failure meant anything from a warning letter to a multimillion-dollar fine or a federal suspension. We had color-coded dashboards. I maintained a real-time risk register that mapped every control to its historical fines, risk exposure, responsible party, and audit frequency. Was that required? No. Did anyone ask for it? Also no. But I've seen what happens when memory fades faster than blame. So I kept records, receipts, every tiny missed inspection, every late training, every quick workaround signed off under pressure. And before we go further, if you're one of the 90% listening to this story without hitting subscribe or like, just know my team used to track unauthorized access attempts with more compassion than that. Subscribing helps this channel grow. Liking? It's like a virtual fist bump to the folks making these stories happen. So go ahead, click it. I promise I won't audit your cookies. Anyway, back to my corner of the office, fluorescent lit and stacked with folders that smell faintly like toner and stale hope. I wasn't trying to make friends. I was trying to keep us out of court. That was the unofficial job description. And for 7 years, we did just that. No fines, no violations. We passed every third-party audit with clean marks, even the aggressive ones who wore steel-toed boots and smelled like burnt coffee and cynicism. We were good, scarily good, but being good makes you invisible. Until someone with a business degree and an ego problem decides you're inefficient. That's what started it. A new hire, Ben, VP of Sales turned interim COO, after our previous operations lead took early retirement Reed, was pushed out after disagreeing with the CEO's plan to modernize the org chart. Ben had the hair of someone who believes in fasting apps and a handshake like he's trying to win arm wrestling competitions against your elbow. His first company-wide message used the word synergies twice and thanked us for being agile. I should have known then, but no, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I scheduled a meeting to walk him through what we actually did, explained the controls, the tracking system, the risk weighting, the absolute necessity of continuity. He nodded a lot, smiled politely, asked 0 questions. A week later, I got the email, effective immediately. My entire team was being realigned. Laid off. 7 people. Gone. I wasn't. They kept me. Ben called me into the conference room with the glass wall and no soul and said, smiling like a man who just discovered a new protein shake, "Don't take it personally. It's just business. You'll manage." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just nodded and something inside me turned to steel. "You think I'll manage, Ben? I will. Just not the way you think." Ben strutted into our Monday meeting 15 minutes late, iced coffee in hand, wearing a quarter zip that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The kind of guy who says, "Let's double-click on that," and thinks grit is something you find in TED talks. He started his PowerPoint with a slide that just said, "Operational optimization, future-forward synergy." I could practically feel the compliance gods throwing lightning bolts at the projector. He clicked to the next slide, and that's when I saw it. Risk and compliance realignment strategy. No one had warned me, no call from legal. No heads up from HR. Just bam, there we were, our department in a red box labeled exceeds current need. I watched as he talked about right-sizing headcount and leveraging cross-functional efficiency. Translation: firing people who didn't hit sales targets because we didn't have sales targets. We had federal checklists, ethics reports, export control filings, and audit trail validations. But to Ben, that was administrative overhead. 2 days later, security badges stopped working for Cheryl, Denise, Yi, and the rest. I found out from Cheryl's text, "Badge denied. Guess I'm redundant. Thanks for everything, boss." I ran to HR, already knowing what I'd hear. It was a strategic call from senior leadership, they said. "We're transitioning toward a leaner compliance structure." Leaner. That's one way to describe an unstaffed function with 7 federal obligations and no humans. I confronted Ben, not publicly yet, just a closed-door meeting. I laid out every consequence. I pulled up 3 federal regulations he clearly didn't understand. I showed him the matrix of responsibilities, what tasks were assigned to whom, and what deadlines were coming up. He scrolled on his phone. When I stopped talking, he looked up, blinked like he forgot I was there, and said with a smirk, "Look, I appreciate the passion, but we've been too risk-averse. Paralysis by analysis. Sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet." I was the egg. My team were the eggs, and his omelet was a compliance catastrophe waiting to happen. And then, like he was tossing me a bone, he added, "You're still here. That says something. You've got institutional knowledge. You'll manage. Don't take it personally." I didn't respond. Not out loud, but inside. Inside, I was already building the detonator. The thing about Ben and people like Ben is they think quiet means compliant, that silence equals surrender. That if you don't scream in the meeting, you've accepted your fate. But I wasn't silent. I was calculating. That night, I logged into the risk register and created 2 new columns, owner and staff status. I filled in every item, every control, every policy, every audit checkpoint. Where it once said Cheryl, I now wrote vacant. Where it used to say Denise, I marked unmanned, 72 regulatory controls, 72 little red flags, and next to them, the potential fine, the actual dollar amount, because if Ben wanted to streamline, he should at least know the price tag. I stayed late that night. The office was silent. No chatter. No keyboard clicks from Denise 2 desks over. No yees humming. Just me, my risk register, and a spreadsheet that now read like a pending indictment. The janitor poked his head in around 9 p.m. "You the last one here again? Looks like I'm the only one left," I said. He nodded slowly. "That bad, huh?" I didn't answer. He just emptied the trash and left, humming the same tune ye used to hum. I sat there until midnight. Ben had no idea what I was holding, but he would. My final week started with a smile so fake it gave me a headache. HR wanted to do a gracious offboarding. That was the word they used, gracious. Like we were exchanging holiday cards, not torching the foundation of regulatory oversight. They offered me a farewell lunch. I declined. I had work to do. They asked me to write a few bullet points for the incoming team that didn't exist. I nodded. Of course, I said, happy to help. They wanted transition notes. What they got was a loaded weapon. I opened the register, one no one else had touched for 7 years, and began the update. Not with anger, not with speed, with surgical precision. Every entry got 2 new columns, staff responsible and current status. I went line by line. Export control, Cheryl, status unmanned. Ethics hotline review, Denise, status unmanned. FCPA vendor screening, Yi, status unmanned. 72 regulatory controls, 72 vacancies, 72 ticking time bombs. Next to each, the risk weighting, the potential fine, the compliance obligation, the trigger threshold. I wasn't just updating a file, I was writing the future. Once I finished, I didn't send it right away. I printed it first, bound it, slid a cover on, stared at it for a moment like it was a confession letter I'd buried in a drawer for years. This was everything they didn't understand, everything they had ignored. Then I wrote the memo. 3 lines, plain, professional, brutal. As requested, please find attached the updated control register outlining current compliance obligations and responsible parties. This should clarify present exposure following recent organizational changes. Let me know if you need clarification. My name I CC'd HR, legal, internal audit. And because God has a sense of humor, I BCC'd the third-party audit firm we'd used for the last 3 years. Not out of pettiness, out of duty. I had a right to know. Then I logged out, shut down the monitor, packed my drawer. Took the little cactus Cheryl gave me 2 Christmases ago and slid it gently into a shoebox. 1 stapler, 1 mug, 1 USB with nothing on it except my resume. I walked past Ben's office. He was on a call, AirPods in, feet kicked up on the desk like he'd just conquered Rome. He saw me, winked, gave me a thumbs up. I smiled back, big, warm, professional. It's easy to smile when you've already lit the fuse. I handed the binder to HR. Here's everything, I said. Every control, every gap, every risk should be very self-explanatory. They took it without opening it. Probably filed it in a drawer marked to be ignored. I walked out of that building like I'd never be back, not physically. But oh, I'd haunt them. Because you don't kill the immune system of a company and expect to walk away scratch-free. That night, I poured a glass of wine and stared out my kitchen window, watching the neighbors try to reverse park a minivan for 8 minutes. I laughed, not at them, at everything, the absurdity, the arrogance, the fact that Ben thought the hardest part of my job was making a checklist. No, Ben, the hardest part was protecting you from yourself. But now, you're on your own, and so is your compliance department. Because you don't just erase people and expect the systems to run themselves, especially when the systems were us. The first sign came on Monday. My inbox bounced back with an error when I tried to send a recipe to Cheryl from my old work email. Undeliverable, address not found. I expected that. What I didn't expect was how it felt, like watching someone box up your desk in a home you never really owned. It wasn't grief. It wasn't even sadness. It was a clean cut, the kind that doesn't bleed right away but makes your whole arm numb. Then Denise texted, "Hey, your name's gone from Slack." Like gone, that hit harder. For 7 years, it meant something. It meant she'll know the answer. She'll fix it. She'll pull the exact clause from the CFR faster than you can Google what CFR means. Now, I was a ghost. They stripped me out of the system like plaque off a corporate artery, assuming they'd unclog something, not realizing I was the blood pressure keeping the vessel from bursting. But they forgot one thing. The register wasn't a work document. It was shared with timestamps with edit history, with a permissions list that included our third-party auditors, updated annually per policy 13.4b, external risk partners. It was still live, and those external auditors, they read things. 3 days later, Cheryl called me not from her phone, but from her boyfriend's. You didn't hear it from me. They pulled your register into an internal review. Someone high up flagged it. I didn't say anything. She whispered, they're freaking out. I bit back a smile. That same night, an email popped up in my personal inbox. Not from anyone at the company, but from a senior associate at our auditing firm. Polite, formal, curious. Would you be available for a brief follow-up call regarding the risk register you submitted as part of your offboarding documentation? You've noted some discrepancies worth discussing. Discrepancies, that's one word for it. What they were seeing wasn't just a spreadsheet, it was a roadmap to liability. I hadn't written it like a log. I'd written it like a forecast. Each control wasn't just listed. It was alive, dates, names, dependencies, and most importantly, status unmanned. The auditors were doing exactly what I prayed they would, following the breadcrumbs. Meanwhile, the company. Rumors started to leak like bad coolant. A friend from HR, one of the few good ones, sent a cryptic message from her personal Gmail. FYI, external audit teams back on site. Everyone's in CYA mode. You didn't hear it from me. CYA mode. Cover your ass. Ben must have been sweating through his Lululemon slim fit slacks. I pictured him in that conference room, flipping through my register like it was written in ancient Greek. Because it might as well have been. He never took the time to learn the language of risk, of accountability. He thought compliance was a mood, something to feel good about, not a structure, not a shield, and now, that shield was gone, replaced by a series of blinking red indicators, each screaming exposure in capital letters. I stayed quiet. I didn't gloat online. I didn't reply to LinkedIn messages asking if I was open to connect. I watched the house I built get tested by a storm I didn't summon, but absolutely predicted. Because the thing about building something well is that even when it burns, the blueprint still speaks. And I'd left mine in plain sight. The first crack wasn't loud, it was a question. A junior analyst from the audit team called me on a Wednesday afternoon while I was standing in line at a car wash. Her voice was young, a little nervous, polite to a fault. Hi, I hope this isn't a bad time, she said, like she wasn't calling to unearth a corporate crime scene. I was just wondering, did you really maintain this register by yourself? I could have lied. I could have said it was a group effort, that it took a village, that I was just part of the system. Instead, I said every entry, every fine reference, every update, all me. She paused. Even the escalation dates? Yes. What about the risk-weighting formulas? Also me. Another silence. Then, almost reverently, it's incredibly detailed. Yeah, I said, stepping forward as the line crept. That was the job. I hung up without fanfare, but my hands were buzzing. It was starting. They were beginning to see, not just the mess, but the precision beneath it. The quiet engine that had been running all this time under their noses. Later that day, Cheryl messaged me again, this time with a screenshot. It was from an internal Slack thread she'd been accidentally left in due to some lazy IT offboarding. A message from Ben, can legal clean this up? The auditors are quoting her register line by line. And below that, the reply from legal, short, sharp, brutal. We can't alter independent submissions. That would constitute misrepresentation. Ben had tried to gaslight a PDF and failed. By Friday, they weren't just interviewing remaining staff. They were asking for clarification on my annotations. Color coding, risk tiers, mitigation deadlines. One message from a compliance consultant I knew from the old days read, your timestamp methodology. Did you base it on NIST 800-53 or your own framework? I nearly laughed. They thought it was based on NIST. I mean, yes, technically. But it was more than that. It was based on memory. On knowing who always dragged their feet during quarterly reviews. On remembering that one vendor who always forgot to submit their ethical sourcing documentation. On knowing, deep in your bones, which file cabinet smelled like moldy shortcuts. Ben didn't have any of that. No one did. And now, there it was. In full view, like a forensic map carved into the walls of a burned-down house. I heard they called in a specialist to reconstruct the operational risk architecture, which is fancy talk for figure out how badly we screwed this up. But the truth was they didn't need to reconstruct anything. The structure was intact, it just didn't have anyone left inside. I began getting LinkedIn pings from unfamiliar names, risk officers, audit associates, a director of regulatory affairs at a rival firm, all dancing around the same thing, we read your register. Let's talk. One message was especially pointed, you don't know me, but I've been in this industry 20 years. What you built? That was art. Art. No one ever called it that before. Not when I was staying late on a Friday to double-check clause references. Not when I was crawling through old vendor contracts because someone reused an old template with the wrong export language. Not when I was hand-annotating audit logs with a yellow highlighter because the system auto-flagged a false positive and I didn't trust it. But now that it was all collapsing without me, it was art. And the exhibit had just opened. The spiral didn't arrive with one big bang, it seeped out, piece by piece like gas from a cracked line you can't quite hear until someone flicks a lighter. It started with finance. A friend of mine in accounting, one of the few still clinging on, sent me a late-night message from her personal email. The subject line was one word, yikes. Inside, a screenshot of a flagged line item, potential exposure estimate, $11.2 m. That wasn't exaggeration. That was a real number, one I had built into the register months earlier, tied to two very specific export controls. If you failed to report them within 90 days, boom, multi-million-dollar penalties. Guess which controls were marked unmanned the day Ben gutted my team? By Tuesday, legal was in freefall. Someone forwarded me snippets of internal emails, bless corporate gossip chains, where mid-level attorneys were trying to reconstruct signatures on compliance forms. The problem? They were sloppy. A backdated signature slipped into an email thread where the actual send date was visible. Worse, they accidentally CC'd a junior from the audit team. The poor kid probably spat out their coffee. That's the kind of mistake you can't unsee. And in the world of compliance, can't unsee it is the kiss of death. Meanwhile, HR tried a different strategy, scapegoating. An all-staff email landed with the subject, unexpected compliance gap. They called it unexpected, like a tornado or a raccoon infestation. Nothing to do with the deliberate gutting of the very department that used to prevent such gaps. They framed it as a temporary transition issue caused by staff realignment. Corporate spin at its laziest. But my register didn't care about spin. My register wasn't sentimental. It was a machine built on receipts. Dates, names, sign-offs. The last person responsible for Control 14.2, Cheryl, terminated May 4. Control 27.6, Denise, terminated May 4. Control 42.3, Yi, terminated May 4. Not unexpected, not a tornado, a decision. And now every fine, every exposure, every dollar amount tied back to those dates. Documented, immutable. No matter how many times legal tried to shuffle the papers, the timestamps told the truth. I heard Ben was pacing conference rooms, jaw clenched, demanding options. The man who once told me not to take it personally was now taking it very personally that his shortcuts had a price tag with 8 digits. The board was restless. Defense contracts, our golden geese, were suddenly in jeopardy. No military supplier wants a partner under federal review. No agency wants to explain to Congress why a contractor with known gaps is still on the payroll. And me? I didn't spiral with them. I didn't panic. I sat in my apartment with a glass of bourbon flipping channels while their empire shook. I thought about every late night I spent building that register, every sigh when someone brushed me off, every half-smirk from execs who thought compliance was a nuisance. Now it was their executioner. And for the first time, I let myself smile, not wide, not triumphant, just a thin, cold curve of satisfaction, because the truth had finally arrived, and it was louder than any defense Ben could mount. The first message came on a Thursday morning, sandwiched between a spam email about miracle vitamins and a note from my aunt asking if I'd figured out how to reset her Wi-Fi. It was from Ben. LinkedIn, hope you're well. Could we chat? That was it, no apology. No acknowledgement. Just a bland, neutered olive branch dressed in corporate neutrality. I stared at it long enough to watch the little scene by recipient indicator flash back at him. Then I closed the app. No reply. Because what would I even say? Yes, Ben, I'd love to swoop in and mop up the bloodstains you left behind while you played COO cosplay. No thanks. By Saturday, a screenshot of an internal memo landed in my inbox, forwarded by one of the few allies I still had inside. The subject, root cause analysis. The content was a bureaucratic obituary. Preliminary findings suggest recent organizational realignments have contributed to material risk exposure. Recommendation: immediate reinstatement of key risk personnel to stabilize compliance framework. I read it twice slowly. Reinstatement. Immediate. Personnel. Translation: they wanted me back. A woman who built the engine they dismantled. The same one they told to not take it personally. Meanwhile, the outside world had already started circling. Recruiter pings lit up my phone like slot machine reels. Senior Director of Risk Management, VP of Compliance, Head of Internal Controls. Some of these jobs paid more than my old salary plus bonus combined. The irony? My resume wasn't even updated. Didn't matter. I didn't need to sell myself. My register, the one now sitting in the middle of their corporate autopsy, was my resume. One recruiter put it bluntly, everyone's read the file, you're the architect. Companies want architects, not tenants. It was flattering and dangerous. Because I could feel the temptation to gloat, to rub it in, to reply to Ben with a one-liner like, hope you're well too. Enjoying the $11.2 exposure? But no, that wasn't the move. The real power was silence. So I stayed poised, calm. I took calls, but I didn't chase them. I listened to offers, but I didn't leap. I sipped my coffee slowly in the mornings, watching LinkedIn notifications multiply, knowing full well that every ping was another crack in their illusion of control. Ben, for all his bravado, was suddenly the one knocking on doors, begging for help. I was the one with options, and it felt good, not petty good, not revenge fantasy good, but grounded, real good. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't the desperate one scrambling to prove my worth. They were. The boardroom was supposed to be Ben's theater, big glass table, leather chairs, a skyline view meant to intimidate whoever sat across from him. But now it was filled with auditors, binders, and faces that looked like they'd aged 10 years in a week. The lead auditor, a man I'd only met twice but who remembered details like a steel trap, stood at the head of the table. Didn't start with a preamble. He didn't waste time with fluff. He held up my register, printed, bound, annotated with sticky flags like it was scripture. This document, he said, tapping the cover, is exemplary. It forecasted nearly every current violation we've confirmed in this review, and it outlined the fines tied to each lapse, some of which are now unavoidable. The silence was thick, not the respectful kind, the suffocating kind where you can hear your own pulse in your ears. One of the board members leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. Who maintained this? The auditor didn't look at Ben. He didn't look at legal. He didn't look at HR. He flipped a page, checked the metadata, and answered plainly, she no longer works here. Her team was eliminated during the recent reorganization. The word eliminated hung in the air like smoke. Ben shifted in his chair, his jaw flexing, his hand twitching toward his phone like he could text his way out of the truth. The board member pressed again, sharper this time. Why would a department this critical be eliminated? No one spoke. Legal stared at the table. HR shuffled papers they weren't reading. Finance coughed into her sleeve. The auditor let the silence stretch. Then he set the register down with a deliberate thud. This wasn't busy work. This was a blueprint. It was predictive. Whoever built this understood your risk posture better than anyone in this room. And right then, though I wasn't in that room, I became the loudest voice there. Not through speeches, not through protests, but through the cold, undeniable precision of a paper trail I'd built when no one was watching. I imagined Ben's face, pale under the boardroom lights, realizing he'd dismissed the one thing standing between him and catastrophe. My silence was echoing back at him, louder than his buzzwords ever were. It wasn't me twisting the knife. It was the record, the receipts, the undeniable math of cause and effect, and the scream of that truth drowned out everything else. The climax came faster than even I expected. One week, Ben was pacing hallways, snapping at assistants, sweating through his button-downs. The next, he was being walked out of the building by two grim-faced security guards. No dramatic farewell, no victory lap. Just a man who thought cutting corners was leadership, clutching a cardboard box filled with stress balls and branded mugs. His legacy reduced to cheap ceramic. The CEO tried damage control. A statement went out, polished and sterile, full of words like misjudgments, course correction, and renewed commitment to excellence. The press didn't buy it. The regulators definitely didn't. You can't spin away hard numbers and sign documents. The number hanging around their neck was brutal. $18 million. $18 million. That was the cost of streamlining. That was the bill for arrogance dressed as innovation. The settlement was public, attached to press releases, financial filings, and whispers in every defense contracting corridor that mattered. Suddenly, the company that once bragged about operational efficiency was synonymous with negligence. But then, in the middle of the chaos, came something unexpected. A letter, handwritten from the old general counsel, the one who always respected the work even when no one else did. It said, "Your register saved the company from criminal charges. They'll never say it, but I will. Thank you." I read it 3 times, the words sinking in like sunlight after a long storm. Then I bought a simple black frame, put the card inside, and hung it on the wall above my desk, right next to a printed copy of the register. Not as a trophy, not as revenge porn, but as proof. That quiet work matters, that invisible labor leaves marks. That precision, even ignored, still carries weight, and then I left it behind. Because while they scrambled to repair contracts and soothe regulators, my world had opened wide. My inbox filled with 3 offers, senior positions from firms that had read the fine print, who knew exactly what my name meant now. I didn't even chase them, they came to me. So I shut my laptop. I closed the blinds. And a week later, I was sitting on a beach, the sound of waves replacing the hum of fluorescent lights, my phone face down in the sand. No speeches, no victory parade. Just me, the ocean, and the quiet knowledge that I hadn't needed to shout to be heard. Vindication isn't loud, it's precise. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.